Hey guys, Weeby News here, and today I am bringing back the character analysis videos. To kick them off, I wanted to make my first one about one of the most interesting characters, in my opinion, from Genshin Impact. If you noticed my slight hiatus in December, one of the main reasons is because I got into Genshin around that time. It has to be one of the most addicting games I've ever played, with all of its limited time incentives and ways you can improve your characters. It just feels like there's always something to do, from grinding to level up characters, to farming for artifacts, to grinding for talent, to collecting ascension material, to daily resins, to weekly bosses. It just never freaking ends. I practically wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat if I forget to use my daily resin. That aside, my first analysis is going to be on KAEYA. He was my favorite out of the starter characters that you receive because first of all, he's pretty suspicious, and second of all, he's not bad to look at, let's be honest. I admit it, I'm a simp. No shame. That aside, this video will focus on his backstory, personality, and some pretty interesting theories about how he could play a major role in the overarching story. Also, this video will contain some major spoilers for the Archon Quest Chapter 1, Act 4, We Will Be Reunited. It's basically the first act after finishing the Liyue story, so if you haven't finished the Liyue Archon Quest yet and you don't like spoilers, you should probably leave this video. I'm also going to be talking a decent bit about the lore regarding KAEYA and Diluc that's shown in the Genshin Impact manga. Also, before we get into the video, I just want to mention that this is obviously just my opinion in how I personally interpret the character. I try to do as much research as possible, and I hope that shows. But at the end of the day, if you disagree with me, that's totally fine. I would love to hear your different interpretations in the comments section. But yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into the video. KAEYA's full name is KAEYA ALBERICH. He was abandoned in Mondstadt by his biological father as a child, and was eventually taken in by Krepus Ragenvender, who is the renowned wine tycoon and father to Diluc. When he explains the story to others, he states, "If Master Krepus hadn't taken me in, I doubt I'd have made it through the storm that night." But this line is one of the many that highlights KAEYA's witty disposition, since it carefully hides a disturbing truth. In reality, KAEYA was left in Mondstadt by his father in order to work as a secret agent for his homeland of Khaenri'ah. And just as a quick refresher, Khaenri'ah was a nation that existed 500 years ago. It was described by Dainsleif as a nation without a god, not because their god died or abandoned them, but simply that they never had one to begin with. And although it was a godless nation, he described it as being powerful and glorious, and that it was the pride of humankind. But 500 years ago, the gods descended upon it and destroyed it. And not only this, they also cursed the civilians of Khaenri'ah, turning them into the monsters of the Abyss that we fight in the game. The Abyss Order specifically is made up of its cursed citizens, and their goal is to get revenge on the gods by wreaking havoc among their 7 nations. For example, they were the ones responsible for manipulating Dvalin against humans, turning him into Storm Terror. Like I said, KAEYA originates from this land of Khaenri'ah. In his character stories, it states that when his father left him in Mondstadt, he told him, "This is your chance, you are our last hope." And in response, it's revealed to the reader that KAEYA would never forget the look of both hope and hatred in his father's eyes as he uttered those words. There's not much revealed about KAEYA's father other than this flashback in his character stories. The mission that KAEYA is sent on for Khaenri'ah is still currently unknown as well. It's only stated that he was placed in Mondstadt to serve their interests. So to be as basic as possible, I'm going to interpret that the hope in his father's eyes likely relates to his dreams of KAEYA avenging their nation through carrying out this mysterious mission, and that the hatred comes from how much it destroys him that he feels forced to abandon his son in order to accomplish this goal. Likely it's directed towards the gods who destroyed his homeland and cursed his people. I'm sure he feels like they're the ones who forced him to do this. But these circumstances caused a lot of internal struggle within KAEYA, which is well outlined in his character stories. His father had abandoned him in this strange and unknown land to fulfill his mission, and it was Master Krepus in the city of Mondstadt that had welcomed him with open arms when they found him. If Khaenri'ah and Mondstadt went to war, which side should he support? To whom should he offer his assistance? His birth father, who had ruthlessly abandoned him, or his adoptive father, who had loved him and raised him? At this point, he spent a huge part of his life in Mondstadt with his adoptive father, Krepus, and his new brother, Diluc, so obviously he feels a huge amount of debt towards those who took him in and cared for him after his abandonment. He and Diluc are described to have been extremely close growing up as well. It's described that KAEYA was Diluc's friend, supporter, and sounding board. He ensured that Diluc got through every challenge he faced smoothly. In the Chinese version as well, they refer to each other as sworn brothers. In the simplest terms, this means brothers who are not related by blood. It also refers to a delicate bond formed between 2 close friends built from trust and honor. Based on the way the character stories describe his father's departure, it seems that KAEYA resents him quite a lot for it, but because there's so much evidence of his internal struggle, I think it can also be deduced that he understands exactly what caused his father to go to such lengths. Their people were all cursed to become monsters, and their homeland was ruthlessly destroyed. I'm sure he feels a sense of loyalty and responsibility to help avenge them and their nation. Deciding to side with Crepus, Diluc, and the people of Mondstadt who accepted him means turning his back on the people of Khaenri'ah, who were scorned by the gods. But in the same vein, siding with his homeland means betraying the people of Mondstadt that loved him and took care of him. These thoughts continued to torment him until a tragic event happened that greatly affected this internal struggle. That was when his adoptive father Crepus suddenly died while escorting a convoy alongside Diluc. They ran into Ursa the Drake, a powerful dragon, and in order to protect himself and his son, he used a delusion he'd been hiding in secret in order to fight him off. And a quick reminder, a delusion is a counterfeit vision created by the Fatui. It can hold power that's much greater than a vision, but it has the risk of backfiring on the user, which is exactly what happened to Crepus. He was so irreversibly injured by this that Diluc was forced to put him out of his misery. KAEYA should have been completely distraught and agonizing in sorrow over his adoptive father's departure, just like Diluc, but instead his first thought was this: even someone like Master Crepus would submit to such a dangerous and evil power. Sinister thoughts flashed through KAEYA's mind and he simply smirked. The world is truly fascinating. I think this whole situation had a huge impact on KAEYA in several different ways. The first aspect I want to focus on is how it upset the delicate balance of his loyalty towards Khaenri'ah and his duty to Mondstadt. The person in Mondstadt that he was the most indebted to for taking him in and caring for him disappeared in a flash. And in a really messed up way, KAEYA felt a sense of relief as this new development makes it a lot easier for him to side with his homeland of Khaenri'ah. In his character stories, it states, as a brother, he should have shared in Diluc's grief, and yet their father lay dying on the ground. He hung back behind his brother, that ancient plot running through his mind. Although understandable, it's also really screwed up to think this, and KAEYA even acknowledges that. He was so consumed by this guilt, he decided on that same rainy night to confront Diluc so that he could come clean about his mission given to him by his father and the internal struggle he's had to face because of it. Once everything was revealed, Diluc was furious and the two engaged in battle. KAEYA felt that this was his punishment for a lifetime of lies. During the fight, it's described that KAEYA was overcome by the sensation of a great elemental power surging through him. Bitterly cold and brittle elemental energy burst forth from the tip of his sword to meet Diluc's searing flames head on. The clash of crimson fire and azure ice created a sudden swirl of wind that stunned them both. This was the grim moment that KAEYA's vision appeared. After this, the brothers went their separate ways and never discussed this confrontation or the origin of KAEYA's vision. And the vision served two purposes to KAEYA. It was a reminder of the hard-fought battle and the prize that he earned for revealing the truth, but it also symbolizes to him that he must live the rest of his life under the heavy burden of lies. KAEYA is an extremely untrusting person, and I think the situation with Diluc is one of the biggest reasons for that. Like I mentioned before, Diluc seemed to be the closest person to KAEYA growing up. They even referred to each other as sworn brothers, and Diluc was the only person he could trust to confide his secret to, and in response he was met with hostility. And of course, I'm not trying to villainize Diluc or anything. I think it's totally understandable as to why he would want to distance himself from KAEYA after learning the truth, and even KAEYA understands this and likely blames himself for the falling out. I believe that's why it says in his character stories that his vision symbolizes to him that he must live the rest of his life under the heavy burden of lies, this being because he feels that since his closest ally Diluc couldn't accept him for who he was, then he should never reveal his true self ever again. And my reason for thinking this is because it seems like he was never able to form another close bond to anyone after this falling out. One of his voiceover implies that the traveler has taken note of his loneliness, and in response, KAEYA playfully shakes it off. Another instance that really shows this loneliness is KAEYA's birthday messages. He mentions that he almost forgot it was his birthday and that he hadn't celebrated it in so long he's not even sure how to approach it. Then, unlike many other characters who celebrate with friends or family, he mentions he's going to the tavern to get drunk and that he has plenty of time to tell you stories, implying to me that he's likely going to drink alone. It's quite the depressing birthday message when you really think about it. And although they're totally different characters, Diluc and KAEYA's biological father have two things in common. They are the only two people to know KAEYA's true self, and at the same time, they're the two people who left him because of who he is. His father, due to their people being disgraced and this being their last hope for vengeance, and Diluc because of how he felt betrayed and lied to all these years. Even though Diluc didn't totally abandon KAEYA like his father did, it does state in KAEYA's character story that the two went their separate ways, and based on how we see them interact in the game versus how they were described to have acted before this, does show a huge change to the dynamic of their relationship, going from practically brothers to estranged estranged siblings. So I think this development could feel like a betrayal, and although he was left by them for different reasons, I can imagine that KAEYA would likely make this connection, leading him to feel that he must distance himself from others, and that when he does interact with them, he must conceal his true personality with charm and slick lies. And I think that's the primary reason for his disposition that we see in the game. Another event that I think heavily shaped his personality was Krepus's death, and the revelation that he'd been holding on to a delusion. I think growing up, KAEYA felt really alone, struggling with his secret, and then all of a sudden the person who was kindest to him, Master Krepus, was revealed to have been hiding a dark secret as well. I think since he was the most indebted to Krepus, he likely put him on a pedestal, and so once this perception was destroyed, it completely changed the way that he interacted with the rest of the world. I think that he thought, if even somebody as seemingly perfect as Master Krepus was hiding an ugly secret like me, then could everybody be hiding these secrets as well? And the reason I deduce this is because of these lines. Even someone like Master Krepus would submit to such a dangerous and evil power. This world is truly fascinating. Combined with this line from his first character story, everyone's got a secret, but not everyone knows what to do with it. This is referencing how he's able to help the Knights of Favonius with his wits rather than his brawn. He's often seen in the tavern conversing with bandits, thieves, etc., so that he can extract knowledge from them and use it to his advantage. I think after Krepus's death, he decided to start examining people to test out this theory, and soon enough he learned that through his smooth talking and observation, he was able to get secrets out of almost anyone. Because KAEYA is an untrusting person himself, and even the one he likely admired the most was hiding a dark side, he decided that he can't trust anyone to show their true selves at face value, and that's why he'll use underhanded tactics as a way to observe others' actions and learn more about their personalities and true intentions from it. This is clearly demonstrated in his story quest, Secret Pirate Treasure. In this quest, KAEYA tells the traveler in Paimon an incredible story about how his grandfather was a pirate who had hidden an invaluable sword in the lost Arcadian ruins. The story is obviously fabricated, and he told them this for a couple of different reasons. Firstly, so that they could spread this fake story around Mondstadt in order to lure out the treasure hoarders, and secondly, so that he could test them and see if they could be tempted by their own greed to try and claim the sword for themselves, which Paimon fails miserably. KAEYA's untrusting nature is also revealed through his physical appearance, namely his eye patch. It's revealed in his Friendship Event 4 that there's nothing physically wrong with his eye. He just chooses to wear an eye patch like one would choose to wear any other item of clothing. But I'm not so sure that this is the truth, and this is because in another voice line, Paimon tells the traveler that while talking to KAEYA, one time he told her that you can tell if a person is lying by looking into their eyes. Since there's nothing wrong physically with his eye, I believe that we can deduce that he wears this eye patch in order to stop his eyes from revealing his conflicting and untrusting nature. I think it could also be meant to symbolize his internal struggle. His uncovered eye symbolizes his duty to Mondstadt, while his other eye symbolizes the other half of him that's still loyal to Khaenri'ah. But this will conclude my section on KAEYA's personality. Feel free to let me know what you guys think. I'd love to hear your opinions and thoughts on his personality as well. Moving on, we're going to talk about KAEYA and Diluc's relationship. A really interesting part about them is that their personalities complement each other a lot. Obviously, they have quite the history. They went from being sworn brothers to rarely interacting. I feel like most people could deduce that the two don't really care for each other, given their past and the fact that they seem to antagonize each other through subtle remarks. I honestly love their sassy remarks to each other. In their voice lines, KAEYA heavily implies that Diluc is boring, while Diluc says you can only trust about half of what KAEYA says. In another one of KAEYA's voice lines, he remarks that he can't believe people drink grape juice and how impatient they must be to not wait until it ferments into wine. And this is another jab at Diluc, who hates the taste of wine and prefers grape juice. And on the same theme in the manga, when KAEYA meets Diluc, he serves him juice knowing that it's KAEYA's least favorite drink, and his reaction to it's pretty funny. But is it really true that they hate each other? Although I think their relationship is definitely strained, I severely doubt that they hate each other, and I have a lot of reasons to outline why. I believe they're a lot more similar than most people might realize. Although Paimon's primary purpose is to be used as emergency food, she does make some pretty interesting insights from time to time. In Diluc's story quest, The Dark Knight Hero's Alibi, she mentions that it's strange that he and KAEYA don't get along well, since they're both really similar. KAEYA's the kind of guy who acts shady in the light of day, while Diluc is the shining beacon of justice in the dark of night. This comment that Paimon makes sums up their dynamic pretty well. On the outside, they seem like total opposites, fire and ice, light and dark, but deep down, they're the same type of people. And this is referenced in KAEYA's character story as well. They were almost like twins, knowing each other's thoughts and intentions without a word, protecting Mondstadt in both light and dark. KAEYA describes it himself in the manga directly too, stating that he and Diluc are both anti-heroes with attitude problems. They both try to achieve justice in unconventional ways, KAEYA through his lies and manipulation in the daylight, and Diluc Diluc by masquerading as the Dark Knight hero at night. Both actions can derive criticism since they both rely on unconventional means. Like I said before, KAEYA uses deceitfulness to corner bandits, thieves, etc. As for Diluc, we see in the Dark Knight hero's alibi that in order to avoid being monitored by the Knights of Favonius, he was willing to purposefully lure an enormous amount of slimes to the city, potentially putting the Knights and the city at risk for the greater good in his eyes, which is protecting his secret identity. Also, originally as the Dark Knight hero, he used his father's delusion, a taboo weapon, to protect the town. As KAEYA says, justice is not an absolute principle, but is the result of striking that fine balance between strength and strategy. As for the details of how it's done, don't worry yourself too much about that. I think that both of them believe in this idea, given the examples I just mentioned. Diluc, before his father's death, was described as being an upright individual who was dedicated to his position at the Knights of Favonius, but after Krepus's death, he was ordered to cover up the incident by Inspector Arok, which caused his faith in the Knights to shatter, prompting him to leave the organization. He also decided to abandon his vision since he felt that it was useless in helping him protect the person he cared about most. After this, he set off on a quest to seek the truth regarding his father's delusion, and when he returned to Mondstadt, it stated that that was when he decided to become the Dark Knight hero in order to shoulder his father's will once more, and that at this point his childish immaturity had been washed away. To me, this means that he discarded his old naive form of justice and came to discover a new one very similar to the one that KAEYA described. So I think based on this, their view of justice is fairly similar. As long as it's for the greater good of Mondstadt, I think they're willing to bend the rules a bit. So I think at the very least, you could argue that they respect each other's shared beliefs, and there's some evidence for this. In the manga, KAEYA is invited to attend Don Winery's meeting, where they discuss a deal with Khaenri'ah. It even appears that he worked with Diluc in his plan to trap one of the Fatui underlings, Krupp, in the wine cellar so that Diluc could interrogate him. The reason I think this is because KAEYA was the last one to approach Krupp, telling him that he and his friends would be heavily compensated, before we see Krupp in the next scene trying to take some of the wine barrels. So it seems like KAEYA's comments could have encouraged him to do so. And KAEYA also acknowledges the situation once Diluc returns upstairs, making it seem like he knew about the plan the whole time. It's also notable that they work together against the Fatui once again later in the manga, and I don't think that they would be working together on such important tasks like this if they didn't trust each other's duty to Mondstadt and sense of justice. So I think based on this, we can confirm the two respect each other and their beliefs enough to work together, but how do the two feel about each other on a more personal level? The most obvious piece of evidence that the two actually really do care for each other is also seen in the Genshin Impact manga. Like I mentioned before, after Diluc's father died, he abandoned his position at the Knights of Favonius and his vision. When Diluc first begins acting as the Dark Knight hero, he uses his father's delusion as his weapon of choice. But in the manga, Diluc eventually ends up abandoning the delusion in order to go along with KAEYA's scheme to ruin the Fatui's plan. After the plan, KAEYA returns Diluc's vision under the guise that he was gifting him a vase. And in return, you can see that it's an item that Diluc cherishes, considering if you visit Don Winery, you can see the vase is still on display. So this to me proves that although there's obvious tension between them, they do still seem to care for each other deep down. Overall, I would describe them as two people who do truly care for each other, but have too much pride to admit it, and this is why their actions show this fondness for each other while their words imply the opposite. At the end of the day, they're really just two people that need to sit down and hash this shit out. Finally, I want to address his overall susness and how this could connect to future plot lines in the main story. A very popular theory is that KAEYA is not only just an agent from Khaenri'ah, but is in fact the prince of that nation. There's a bunch of reasons for this theory. Also, I first found out about it through this video by WhaleStat. I'm going to be referencing some of their points while mixing in my own and some other information that I found online. So I'm going to link the video below if you would like to check it out. Like I mentioned before, the Abyss Order is made up of citizens from Khaenri'ah who were turned into monsters. I couldn't find a line directly confirming that Hilichurls were also previously citizens of Khaenri'ah, but I did find some evidence to support this idea. Firstly, we see that the Abyss Order often enlists them to do their work, and it would make sense for them to work together if they were also from Khaenri'ah. Another notable thing is that in the description in the archive section, it mentions they look very similar to humans, but are stripped of their intellect and spirituality. And although they've been around for thousands of years, they became widespread after the pitch black calamity that happened 500 years ago, likely referencing Khaenri'ah's fall. It seems very coincidental, if not connected. There's also a tribe in Dodapa Gorge, referred to as the Eclipse Tribe, who worship an object that appears to represent an eclipsed sun. Many speculate that this object might be a reference to the now fallen Eclipse dynasty in Khaenri'ah. It's also notable that the traveler seemed familiar with the eclipse symbol as well when talking about it in their voice lines. But how does KAEYA connect to this? Well, it's confirmed that KAEYA speaks Hilichurl Hilichurrian, and it's notable that both he and Dainsleif, another character confirmed to have been from Khaenri'ah, share Hilichurrian symbols on their designs. He and Dainsleif also share diamond pupils too. Some other suspicious stuff about KAEYA is that his design looks very similar to that of a Cryo Abyss Mage. Along with this, his basic attack combo involves him teleporting, also like an Abyss Mage. KAEYA's talents are pretty sus too. He had one that was literally called Heart of the Abyss before it was later changed to Glacial Heart. His constellation is Pavo Ocellis, which is Latin for peacock eye spot. In Greek mythology, the peacock is associated with being all-seeing because in one story, the goddess Hera appoints a giant named Artis who has countless eyes to watch over Zeus's lover. Zeus sends Hermes to slay this giant, and afterwards, Hera placed the eyes of Argus, who sees all or is all eyes, on a peacock's tail. These eyes are said to represent the stars in the night sky or the whole starry sky. So potentially, KAEYA's constellation could symbolize how he sees all that transpires in Mondstadt, while hinting that he himself is similar to that of a peacock, since he uses his charm to extract information from others. And also Mona, who's an astrologist, has a very ominous reading for KAEYA, in which she states he believes he has made a clean break with his past, but one day fate will catch up with him. When it does, he will have a major decision to make. As you can see, it very clearly reflects his internal struggle that was outlined in his character stories. Finally, when talking about Fischl, the Traveler mentions that Fischl's eye patch is fitting considering how she refers to herself as royalty. So then KAEYA jokes about how that must make him a future royal progeny too. A lot of people saw this line as potential foreshadowing. In my opinion, the most interesting reason as to why KAEYA could possibly be the Prince of Khaenri'ah is how he relates to Norse mythology. For this section, I'm going to be referencing Dainsleif Diaries theory on Instagram. There is a lot more to their theory than what I'm going to mention in this video, so I really recommend checking out their posts if you're interested in this kind of stuff. I will link it along with the other sources in the description. Alberich, KAEYA's family name, is a German name which means ruler of supernatural beings. This of course could foreshadow that he comes from royalty. It may seem like a bit of a stretch at first, but Dainsleif's name also comes from Norse mythology. It's used as the name of King Hogni's sword, crafted by the dwarf Dane. When drawn, the sword cannot be sheathed again unless it is taken to life. This relates to Dainsleif in Genshin because he was referred to as the Twilight Sword when he was one of the royal guards of Khaenri'ah. In Norse mythology, the sword was famously mentioned in Prose Edda, which featured an eternal battle, where the soldiers who fought each day were revived by a princess each night and would repeat the battle every day for eternity. In Genshin, it's revealed Dainsleif failed to protect Khaenri'ah and was given a curse of immortality to forever wander the wilderness while he watched the people he was supposed to protect turn into monsters. Both stories here contain similar themes of eternity. And back to the name Alberich, it's most notably used as the name of a prominent character in Old Norse legends. Most people connect the Genshin story to the musical drama Der Ring des Nibelungen, composed by Richard Wagner, which is based on these legends. The reason there's a lot of speculation that Genshin is loosely based off of these dramas is because so far two characters in Genshin share similar names. The first being Alberich, KAEYA's last name, is shared with the chief of dwarves in the drama, who also serves as the story's main antagonist. The second is Rheindaughtr, which in Genshin is the name of Albedo's master. Rheindaughtr means daughter in Rhine in Icelandic, which has the same meaning as Rhine maidens who appear in these dramas. Other than the names, the situations with the Alberich family in both the dramas and in Genshin are pretty similar. It seems likely that KAEYA's dad is meant to symbolize Alberich from the drama, while KAEYA is meant to symbolize his son Hagen. Alberich, the chief of dwarves, lives in the underground realm of Nibelheim, similarly to how KAEYA's father is from Khaenri'ah, also an underground realm with little to no natural fauna. Alberich in the drama renounces love and has a son named Hagen, solely for the sake of getting revenge on his enemies. It's not too different from Genshin, where it's revealed that KAEYA's father abandons him in Mondstadt as the last hope for Khaenri'ah. Like I mentioned before, he likely wants to get revenge on the gods and their countries for what they did to his. Hagen is described to be very similar to KAEYA, both in looks and personality-wise as well. Hagen was described as being a cunning and manipulative person who's able to use his wits to get what he wants done. He's also depicted to only have one eye, similarly to how KAEYA covers up one of his eyes with an eye patch. They also both struggle with themes of loyalty and duty, and their fathers both give them revenge missions. If KAEYA is loosely based on this character Hagen, which given the evidence provided seems pretty possible, that I don't think it's too far of a stretch to think that he might also be the prince of his homeland too. There is a lot to this theory, a lot more than I mentioned in this video, so like I said before, I highly recommend checking out the video and the post that I mentioned. But yeah, this will conclude the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Feel free to let me know what you think of KAEYA. Do you agree with my analysis or disagree? I'd love to hear in the comment section below. I'm still pretty new to the lore of Genshin, but I did try my best best to research everything as thoroughly as possible. The wiki for Genshin is extremely organized too, so that helped a lot time frame wise. But yeah, I had a ton of fun making this video. I've gotten really into Genshin recently, so I'd love to make more videos on it if you guys are interested. If there's any other characters you guys would like me to analyze, or just any other theories or things you'd want me to talk about, I would very much like to know, so please let me know in the comments section. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please do leave a like and a comment and subscribe if you enjoyed it. That kind of stuff really does help me out a lot. And yeah, I will see you guys real soon.